Well, here we are, another stop on the journey to finding hope, inspiration, and positivity in this crazy world we all live in. You are listening to Changing the Perspective podcast. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel and like this video below. If you are listening on a podcast service, please like our podcast on your preferred service. No matter how you choose to hear this interview, we are grateful you are following us on this journey. New interviews will be released weekly and cover a variety of topics that all bring a situation of struggle that end in positivity. Maybe you can relate to an interview topic, or maybe you just need some hope and inspiration. Either way, enjoy. Hey everyone. Today we are welcoming one of my, again, podcast group friends that I keep talking about. I've made all these friends in this community of podcasting on Facebook, and Bella is one of those. So today we have Miss Bella Page with us. She is actually what I would call a concussion specialist, just because she's had so many. She's had to learn a lot through life. So today she's actually going to talk to us about post-concussion type recovery, how she has gone from the concussion to where she is now, and kind of all the things that have happened in between, so that people that are experiencing some sort of brain injury can relate to the story and know that there's places they can go and resources they can see. So, Miss Bella, tell us where this all started for you.
For sure. So thanks for having me on
You're
first.
welcome.
So I've had a lot of concussions, actually, over 10, and they all happened over time. They weren't all like back to back. A few were, but most of them weren't. I had one from a snowboarding accident. I decided to sit in front of a jump after racing my friend down a ski hill, and then that's when I realized that uh, sitting in front of a jump is a terrible place to sit. 20-year-old flew over the jump. I was 8 years old, and then we flew down the hill. And then at that time I had like symptoms, but I don't really remember. Like it was so long ago. And then I got a few other injuries after, mostly from show jumping horses. And then I was so into show jumping horses to the point where I started to get a headache every day from the head injuries. And then I didn't tell anyone. So I actually kept it a secret from my family and the families that I was living with and my coaches and all those kinds of things because I didn't want to stop. I was like so competitive and so into what I was doing. I was so worried that if I told them, they would make me quit. And I was doing really well. So I did that for almost 8 months. I kind of hid it from everyone. And that's a really long time to hide a lot of pain. And I wasn't sleeping a lot. And then what had happened is I had slowed down. I had moved back home because I'd been living away to go back to school because I was in high school at the time. And then it all caught up with me to the point where I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't read. I could barely walk. I was in a terrible amount of pain. And then a lot of mental health stuff set in because I was told to maybe you should just quit school and try again later, was what one of the doctors had said, which was really worrying to me because school was important as well. And not riding was huge. So I did graduate high school at the right time. And then I went through university. And during all this time, I had chronic pain. I had headaches every day for 7 years. And every single day, there was no break. And they ranged from all different levels of severity. I got a few concussions in that time because I'm a very active person and I like to do things. And I did a ton of therapy at that time, from acupuncture, laser therapy, eye therapy, massages, chiropractors, like pretty much everything you can think of across the board. And then what happened in my last year of university, I thought my mental health was a lot better than it was, but it wasn't. And actually, I kind of stepped over the edge and ended up in a hospital room and then forced into mandated therapy. And that mandated therapy is where my life turned around because I got tools to handle the stress of my injuries because the mental health was taking over my life. I would be driving down the road and be like, just drive off the road, get off the road. Why are you dealing with this? What are you living through? Who wants to live in this much pain? Is this really worth it? And the therapy gave me tools to calm down those thoughts and then carry on my life. So then almost 2 years later, I started a foundation or business, I guess, to help people with concussions and their recovery after. So that's where I'm at today, a little
Okay.
bit.
So, when you talk about mandated therapy, I assume you're talking like talk therapy, kind of the psychotherapy type stuff.
Yeah, I had to go in. It was due to like a suicide attempt, so I had to go and do therapy afterwards. It's like mandated, otherwise you have to stay in the hospital. And so I had to go, and it was like I sat in a room with a wonderful woman, and she would talk to me, and we would go through different exercises. Like it was a venting session, but I learned that it was so much more than just venting. It
Mhm.
wasn't just there for me to complain about my issues. It was for me to have tools that I could use outside of that room. So that's what made a huge difference for me.
Got it. How do your parents handle like this starting so young for you, and then once it finally came out, when you were show jumping, how did they handle kind of the information or what all was going on?
Yeah. So both differently, actually. So my mom was very like concerning, like always like, how are you doing? Are you okay? And she's also the one who dealt with my anger. So anger issues is a really common thing after head injuries, lack of control of emotion. And I had a lot of trouble with that. So I would lash out at her because I was in so much
Mm.
pain. And then I wouldn't know how to apologize. And so she dealt with that. And she also dealt with I was in ER a lot for the pain and all the other symptoms. So she was the one who slept on the bottom of my hospital bed a lot while waiting for tests. And then my dad handled it in a different way, and he could help. So he is big into healthcare. So he spent hours and hours researching different things that I could try and sending me to doctors and specialists and therapists, trying to get me as much help as I could. So they
Okay.
both two different ends. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to have supportive parents, though.
Yeah, no, they were super supportive. Yeah. No,
That's
they
wonderful.
wanted me to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did your friends take it at school? I mean, if you're in constant pain, you probably weren't quite as fun of a person, when you weren't
Yeah.
feeling good.
I think some of them were kind of they didn't know, I guess. A lot of them knew I had like head problems. Like they were like, "Oh, well, your head hurts," and that's pretty. They just thought I had headache problems. That was pretty much it was summed up as that. And I wasn't going a lot. I went to like one class a day or once a week sometimes, and they didn't really know what was going on because I would be smiling and happy, and then you paid for it the next day because you only get like so much energy a day, especially when you're first going through your brain injury. So when you go out and I go do things, then the next day I'm in bed. So there was like a lot of that. So they didn't really know a lot that was going on with me. And I didn't talk about it. Like I just said my head hurts all the time and I'm going to the doctors all the time. And I knew I was at the hospital all the time because I'd send them a picture with me and I'd have an IV in my arm getting meds. And but I didn't really tell them a lot about it. And then my siblings handle it a lot different. Like I have a little sister and she was originally kind of concerned with why is she not going to school and I have to go to school because she would see me. I did really poorly in the morning and then the afternoon, but usually I do a little better at night. So that's when she'd see me. She'd be like, well, why wasn't she at school? Like she seems okay now. And I wasn't really okay, but I was doing a lot better. I was out of bed by then usually. And so that was interesting. And then my one of my older sisters, she's a nurse, so she was like very concerned about my health. And then my brother was just he always made jokes, try to keep me happy, I guess. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, tell me a little bit about, kind of how you are now from a symptom type thing. Do you still fight symptoms or are they all gone?
Yeah. So my symptoms aren't all gone. Like they're definitely like I wouldn't say I'm back to normal, but they're definitely reduced. And I did so many therapies. I can't tell you 100% which therapy worked because there were so many in there. But like learning my triggers was a big thing. I have headphones that I carry everywhere. They're really little. They go inside my ears and they block out certain frequencies. So that allows me to go to like concerts or like a loud anything really that's just extra loud, like somewhere that you would go even just to a sporting event that's a little louder than normal, or restaurants that are really loud. Sometimes I'll put them in. They're attached to my purse at all times. And then I'm big on sunglasses because the sun's a bit of an issue. But most of like I don't have a headache every day anymore. I do get something called cluster headaches now, which isn't directly related to my head injuries, which is of course I had to get those too. But that's like it feels like someone punched you in the face in the morning. And like I remember like getting it a couple times, like, "Oh, what did I do in my sleep? Like, did I whack myself?" And but that was a big thing. But now the headaches, usually it's if I push myself too hard. Like I know it's my fault. Like, and then diet is a huge thing too, because inflammation in the brain is a very big problem.
Okay. So if
Yeah.
you looked at like an MRI of your brain, would you see
Hmm.
the actual damage or is it really
No.
just okay? So it's not a
Yeah, no, it's
structural
not.
problem at
No, I've never had. There's one scan called a SPEC scan, and that shows a lot of the like damage to your brain. I've never had one done because it's a lot of radiation, and it's not. It doesn't. The only thing it gives you is more clarity, but it doesn't give you answers, I guess
oh,
exactly.
okay.
So I've never had that done. But no, my scans they're clear because that's what most. Unless you have a brain bleed, most of us are very. There's nothing in the scans, which makes it harder sometimes to
Right.
accept.
Right. Do you feel like you had more extensive symptoms and damage because you had several kind of in a frequent time frame versus like being able to recover from one and then having another one a little
Yeah,
bit later or whatever?
I don't think because I like now this is what I do. I talk to individuals who have had one head injury to way more than I have that they can't even count from playing things like football. And the symptoms don't seem to exactly line up with
Mm,
the either the severity of your brain injury or the amount because I've talked to lots of people and they've only had one head injury and it's been 5 years and they're still suffering. And I've met a few friends that have had more than me and they're doing like pretty well. So it's really unknown. Like I'm in my master's for neuroscience right now and the amount we know about the brain is so limited that it's so hard to understand what is going on and why
okay.
one person has crazy effects, they were blacked out and or somebody they got whiplash, they didn't even hit their head and their symptoms are severe for a couple of years.
Ah, okay. Well, tell us a little bit about this thing you've started to kind of help the people that are in similar situations as you.
Yeah, for sure. So I started Post Concussion Inc. is what it's called. And I started it because it was what I needed when going through all of my head injuries. I needed to understand that there was lots of people out there with me
Mhm.
and I wasn't alone, especially as a teenager. I had friends who would fall off and have worse falls off of a horse than I would, and I didn't get it. I was really angry and mad, and I needed someone to explain that to me, to how to handle it,
Mm,
and that's a lot of what it's for. And I also created it for people like families because it affects your family just as much as it affects you. And that's not really shared enough because the whole like my parents were affected, my siblings were affected, my partner was affected, my friends were. So it's really important that they get an understanding as well and someone tells them what to do, how to handle it. So I'm including all of that. That there's a blog, so it's really short posts because I couldn't read a lot when I was going through this. So I was like, why would I make long posts if I wouldn't have been able to read them. So keep them short and to the point. And then there's also a podcast called the Post Concussion Podcast, which is life after brain injuries. And it's guests from survivors, parents, doctors, all across the board, athletes, someone who got injured at their office, like all different kinds of situations. Because I want to prove that and show that brain injuries happen everywhere. It's not just athletes, it's not just car accidents, it's in your own home sometimes too. So
yeah.
those are the two main focuses. I do have awareness apparel too, just because I always wanted some, so I made some for to sell instead. Because I could never find any that I loved, and I was like, I'm just gonna make it instead, and then other people will have some too.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Do they find that on your website, I guess?
Yes, you can.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Um,
Yeah.
so you mentioned, like the short and to the point thing. How how are you managing in like college? I mean, you're in neuroscience and stuff. Like that seems
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it is a little crazy. It's actually crazy. It's crazy doing a master's degree and starting a business at the same time, trying to
For
help
sure.
people. My calendar looks insane.
Yes, I'm sure.
At least it's COVID. At least it's COVID right now, so I don't need a social life, so it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Yeah, so reading was really hard. So now I do a lot of audio. So like I use Adobe, it'll read it to me. So I do that. And then I also, if I'm gonna read it, because some articles I find it better, I break it up. Like I'll read for a bit, and I'm really big on naps. Like I have a nap every day. I had a nap before this so that I could like be good for it.
Yep.
And it makes a big difference. So that was a big thing. And then while I was like, this is online, well, because of COVID, and I chose to do it online this time. But my other courses, you had to be there. So I just didn't go because the lights were too bright and then it was really noisy. So I would go, but not as often as you're supposed to. But I kept up with my work because nowadays your textbook and all of the everything is on the computer.
Oh
So
yeah.
you
Oh
don't
yeah.
always have to go depending on the professor. Some you really have to go because they don't put anything online and you have to listen. But
Yeah.
most of them it's all on the computer.
Yeah.
So I did that and then I had accommodations. So if I missed, I could get extensions on assignments for bad times. And then I also would go, exams were really special. So I would go into a totally different area than everybody else. I would have to actually schedule my exam myself. And I would go and I would wear headphones and in a very quiet room. And then because I had memory issues, I would have a word sheet. So just ran like words of the topics, just so single words. And that would be like my reminder sheet when answering questions, because otherwise, and it would get approved by the professor like before I brought it in. And it kind of gave me that little, I needed it because otherwise I'd be reading a question, be like, I know I read this, but like I couldn't tell you when, what it has to do with anything. So that word sheet would sometimes help spark a memory. And then I also got extra time if I needed it. Usually I was pretty good because I didn't want to be there for longer anyways.
Hmm.
And then I also got breaks if I needed. Like if I was having a really bad headache that day, I could like just go sit in a room. There's like moderators everywhere, and then just sit there for a few minutes and then go back and finish it.
Okay. So, how do
Yeah.
you receive accommodations through school? Is there a department that you have to go to, or?
So it all depends on the school, but usually it's an accessibility department. So it's like student accessibility services is what it was at the one university I went to. Another one, it was a little different, but usually like disability services accessibility. And you go and like you don't have to be like people think of disability and they think wheelchair, but that's not true. So
Mhm.
like there's people that even had it who had like severe anxiety about tests and they just needed that other space so they weren't around other students because it's not cheating, it's allowing you to succeed as equally as everybody else. So it's really important. And I would go and then they give you usually a form and then you bring it to your doctor and they fill it out and check mark and like go over what you need. I had to do like 8-hour assessments to do that. Because the memory thing is a big thing that they have to prove that you have issues with. So I did like an 8-hour day. I've done it a couple times to prove that I was having issues, but that's fine. But if you don't have that, then yeah, you just have your doctor fill out a form and they like kind of go through the whole checklist. And usually it's nice to do it while you're there so they can ask you questions. And then usually each semester you have to redo it to like get your evaluations. But it makes the world of a difference. Like there is no way I would have graduated without it. Like
Yeah,
it wouldn't have been possible
that's
because
awesome.
that person tapping a pencil in an exam room, especially in exams in university, because sometimes it's in like a giant gym.
Yeah.
So it's super echoey and noisy and extra bright. So that person like tapping their foot or their pencil, that sound would be so much on my ears that could make me get up and have to leave because the pain, or just be so overwhelming because I can't tune it out. So it's essential. I needed it.
Okay. You
Yeah.
mentioned in your when you were talking about your blog and kind of the people it's for, your partner. So that's highly
Yeah,
important because to
it is.
date with a kind of, I guess, memory or brain injury type thing that you have, I mean, that would be hard for any partner to understand and be able to help and cope and all of that. Has that made it hard for you?
Uh, it has and it hasn't.
Okay.
I had a partner and we dated for a long time and he had actually had a few head injuries so
Ah,
from car accidents. So that helped a little bit. So he had some understanding there.
yes.
But actually a few months ago I started dating someone new. And that was a learning curve that I kind of forgot about.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we were talking. I remember I lashed out really hard one day, and I like had to explain the next day, like, I'm sorry, my head was really hurting. And he's like, can you just tell me when your head is hurting in that way, so I have a heads up that I'm not like, he's like, it's fine, I understand, like that's why you reacted like that, because I hadn't in a few months, because we hadn't been around each other. You're not always together every single day, right? So, and so it's like I have to remind myself and him that he doesn't know my whole history,
Right.
and he hasn't been around me for that long. So I have to do like a check both ways. Like, okay, I'm not, this isn't what I mean. I'm apologizing. Like, or I have a bad headache today and I'm sorry. Like, I'm going to spend the next 2 days in bed and that's how this works. And I apologize that I'm canceling all of our plans. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's a big deal.
yes. So for people that have or are going through this, what are some resources you recommend for them to help them kind of learn some more about it or get some help or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. So you can check out my website, of course,
Mhm.
postconcussioninc.com, as we talked about. And then your local, so Facebook has tons of support groups, and I really recommend them. There's tons. You just search post concussion and go into groups on Facebook, and there's tons of support groups. There's ones directed just at caregivers, there's ones directed at just individuals surviving, and they are huge. You can ask any question in those groups, and tons of people will respond and give you an answer no
Awesome.
matter what your question is about. There's no dumb question. Like, if you're curious about anything, you can ask. Especially if you're trying to get understanding about like your partner, your child, or like maybe your parents, because your parent got a brain injury. That's also a thing that happens that I've had to talk a few people through. So those are really great. And then brain injury associations are everywhere. So if you're at like the TBI, which is a bit more of an extreme brain injury than a concussion, then a lot of the time those they have support groups and all that kind of stuff that meet weekly or monthly that you can go into, which can be really helpful.
Awesome. Do you have any
Yeah.
advice for people that are venturing into this whole recovery stage?
World. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first thing I like to say is that you need to talk to someone about what is actually going on. And if you're an athlete, you need to stop lying, because you probably are. Because I lied, and every athlete I've talked to has lied to either their doctors, their coaches, or their parents about how they're doing, because they want to get back in. And what I realized is that if I had not lied, there's a higher chance that I would still be able to ride today. And today I can't. So it's really important that you do talk about those things. And mental health, don't be afraid to like vent to your friends or whatever, and that's fine. But your friends aren't going to give you the tools to fix your mental health. They're not. I have the best friends in the world, but they don't have those tools. So don't be afraid to ask to find a therapist. Ask your doctor, or and like find a therapist that works for you, because a lot of people I talked to, they went to one appointment with one therapist and they hated them.
Yeah.
And then they never went again. You have to find someone who clicks with you, because they have to understand how you work and you have to like their process. And they all have different ones. So if you don't like it, then just try again. And same thing with doctors. I had doctors who thought I was faking. I had doctors who would just give me meds. I had all different ranges. So it's really important to just keep trying, because the brain injury community, it's huge, but the support is small. So it's really important to advocate for yourself when you're going through all
Yeah.
of it. And especially if you're a parent, like advocate for your child and advocate for them when they're in school. Like, I was in high school and my mom came in with me to talk with the like principal of the school because of what I was going through, because I needed that, because I wasn't at the point to explain my situation. So she did it for me and it made a big difference.
Okay. Any final
Yeah.
words you want to share, or is that really it?
Oh, no. Well, you can check out my stuff, but I could talk about brain injuries forever because I've been doing this for a really long time. So, yeah,
Well,
no, just be aware. That's all.
and we'll make sure that we post any resources and all of your contact information, your podcast information, your website, all into the description of this interview. So people that are
Yeah.
listening or watching, it's easy access. They can find you.
Mhm.
Um, hopefully can connect to all the right places and get some resources. Well, I want to thank
Yeah, for sure.
you so much for being on here and sharing your story and kind of what you're going through. I appreciate all the information. And if you enjoyed what she had to say, please go over and like her page, her podcast. Pay attention to what she's doing. She's got some big things planned. Make sure to like the video below or your podcast service, favorite it if you can. We just really appreciate you joining us on this journey, and we will catch you all next time. Bye.
Bye.